My name is Carlton Cartwright, and I'm the Executive Director for the Veterans Memorial and Multicultural Histories Incorporated. And today is April the 2nd. It's Saturday morning, and the year is 2022. And we're located at Lake Ashton in Polk County. And sir, what is your name?
My name is Rios.
Okay, and what city do you live in?
Well, I live here in Lake Wales. I've been living here now for 16 years.
Okay, and when is your birthday?
My birthday is the 30th of June, 1940.
Okay, and where were you living at the time? Where were you born?
Well, I was born in Lyman, Nebraska. It's in the western part of the state of Nebraska.
Mm-hmm. Okay, and is that where you were living at the time when you went into the service?
Now, at an early age, like about 2 years old, we moved to Wyoming. We moved to Cheyenne, Wyoming, which is just about 80 miles to the west where we lived in Lyman, Nebraska. And we were living in Cheyenne. And then my dad, who was a B-17 pilot during World War II.
Mm-hmm.
And so we lived there until the end of the war. Then when my dad got out of the Air Force, well, the Army Air Corps in those days, he came back to Cheyenne, and we lived there for another several years. And basically, I grew up there in Cheyenne.
Okay. What were you doing at the time that you decided to go into the service?
Well, I was in high school. And since my dad had been in the Army Air Corps, I always wanted to be a pilot like my dad. Mm-hmm. And so at the time, I found out that I had to wear glasses. And at that time, you couldn't be a pilot if you had uncorrected vision. So since I had to wear glasses, I couldn't be a pilot. So rats. So my next door neighbor, who grew up exactly my age,
Right.
we get up and he wanted to go in the Navy. And I said, "The heck you want to go in the Navy for?" Well, he slick talked me into joining the Navy. So when I was a junior in high school, I joined the Navy Reserve, which at that time was I had to do 2 years active duty and do 4 years in the reserve, which is pretty good.
Okay.
So I would do so between my junior and senior year, that summer I went to boot camp, in the Navy boot camp in Great Lakes, Illinois. Then I came back, did my senior year. Then after my senior year, it was my turn to go into the Navy for 2 years.
Okay.
And I had done real well taking my test for the Navy. And so the Navy recruiter said, "Trin, you can go to any school you want to in the Navy because you got such a high score." So he said, I told him, "Well, I want to be in aviation." He said, "Well, you can become an aviation electronics technician, work on airplanes, on aircraft carriers and things." I said, "Okay, let me do that." And he said, "Well, unfortunately, the school doesn't start for another 6 months and you can't go to that." So he said, "Well, the next best choice would be a Navy electronics technician, get to work on communications, radars, and stuff like that for the Navy." I said, "Okay, I'll do that." He says, "Well, that's a 50-week school. In order to go for that, since you're only going to do 2 years active duty, you have to extend your enlistment for 2 years. Mm-hmm. So you have to do 4 years active duty and 2 years of reserve." I said, "Okay." So I signed up. So I went to electronics school. After electronics school there, and I went to Treasure Island, which is in the middle of San Francisco Bay, which is really a great place. I love San Francisco. So after I finished my school, I went to a year shore duty in Vallejo, California, at the Navy shipyard up there, where they happened to be building submarines there. I said, "Wow, that's pretty cool. Look at those big submarines." And so after I finished my 1 year tour there, unfortunately, one of the radiomen there was a submarine guy, second class radioman. So he says, "Hey, if you've got to go to sea, you got to go to sea in submarines." And he slick talked me. We went to see some of the submarines they were building there in Marada. So I said, "Okay, great, I'll go with submarines." So I put in for submarine school, and the guy said, "Well, great, you go to submarine school, you're gonna have to extend your enlistment again." I said, "Okay." So then I extended my enlistment for another 2 years.
Right.
So now I was going to do 6 years in all active duty. I said, "Okay, that's okay, I don't care." So after I finished my year there in Vallejo, I went to submarine school in New London, Connecticut. Spent 8 weeks up there. I don't know if you've ever been to New London, Connecticut, but in the wintertime, it is cold. The wind blowing off the river, the submarine base is located right on the river, right on the ocean, Atlantic Ocean. On the it's cold. So the wind was coming up there, and I spent the coldest weeks I've ever spent in my life. So after I finished submarine school, I did real well in classes, so you got the choice of your home port you wanted to go to. Well, the submarine port, of course, was New London, Connecticut, which is so cold, I said, I don't want to go here. Then the next choice was Pearl Harbor, Hawaii. I said, oh, God, what a chance to go to Pearl Harbor.
What year was that?
That was in 1959.
And I'm going to ask you another question before we
Sure.
go any further, if you don't mind. Why did you choose the Navy?
Well, I really wanted to go in the Air Force, but my slick talking neighbor talked me going to the Navy. And I said, you know, here we are in the middle of Wyoming,
Okay.
and they got this thing called the ocean. And we never seen the ocean, you know, Wyoming is a long way from the ocean.
Right.
So I said, okay. Slick talking devil that he was, I said, okay, so that's what I wanted to go in the Navy.
Uh-huh.
So I got to Pearl Harbor, Hawaii on my first submarine, which is a diesel boat, USS Carbonero. I spent almost 3 years on Carbonero.
Wow.
And I love Pearl Harbor. Hawaii was wonderful. And being on that diesel boat, we got to go to the Westpac run, the Western Pacific. We got to go to Japan, South Korea, Hong Kong, the Philippines. Almost made it to Australia, but one of the submarines that was down there with us got into an accident, and so he had to go to the shipyard, and so we had to cover for him. So we wound up operating out of the Philippines for 3 months, which is not a bad deal.
Okay.
Philippines is pretty nice. But we got to go to the place, you know, I got to go to Hong Kong. We spent Thanksgiving week in 1960 in Hong Kong, which was a wonderful place to spend Thanksgiving.
Okay.
Yeah, loved it. But then after that, after I did my tour on Carbonero, we went back to Pearl Harbor, and I was a second class petty officer at the time, electronics technician, and the XL called me in one day and says, Rios, the squadron's got a new duty, new requirement to go to this thing called nuclear power school. Do you want to go? I said, no, sir, I want to stay aboard the Carbonero. He said, okay. Next month he calls me and says, Rios, squadron's got another quarter for ETs, go to nuclear power school. You want to go? I said, no, sir, I want to stay at Carbonero. He said, okay. Next month he calls me and says, Rios, you got 3 choices. You can go to nuclear power school, you can go to this thing called FBM schools, I don't know what that is, you can go to that, or you can go ride our destroyer. I said, well, XO, I want to stay on Carbonero. He says, that's not a choice, pal. I said, well, I know I didn't want to ride the destroyer, because those were horrible.
What do you mean? Why were they horrible?
We operated with destroyers before, and at sea, one of the beautiful things about a submarine in rough weather, you go down and get under. You can go down 200 feet in a typhoon, barely feel it. Go down to 800 feet, you don't feel it at all.
Right.
Just like being in here.
Uh-huh.
On a submarine, you can do that. But on a destroyer, you're going like this.
Right.
And those guys are watching them puke. Oh, they're horrible. You know, we operated with a destroyer, with a destroyer in the State 6C, and the submarine, and the destroyer comes up like this, and you can see water underneath it. And it comes down, and the water breaks over the bridge. And I said, oh, I don't want to do that. So my choice was FBM school. So I wound up going to Dam Neck, Virginia for 6 months, going to FBM school. And I got to go to ride to FBM submarines. So after that, I went to my first FBM submarine, which is USS John Adams, up in Portsmouth, New Hampshire, under new construction. So I spent, actually I spent a year and a half on John Adams. Got to my sea trials, big boats. The difference between an FBM submarine and a diesel boat is like a Model T Ford and a Cadillac. It's just unbelievable. The submarine is about 3 times the size. It's just unbelievable. So I spent some time on there, and one of the things I did when I was on John Adams, I applied for this thing. The Navy had a program called NESEP, Navy Enlisted Scientific Program, where the Navy would send you to college for 4 years, give you your full salary, pay for everything, buy your books, your things, and everything.
Right.
So you got a free ride for college for 4 years. And when you graduated, you got a commission, and you had to do 4 years in the Navy as an officer. And I said, hey, that sounds a great deal. So I signed up, I got selected, and I wound up going to the University of New Mexico for 4 years and got a degree in electrical engineering. compliments of the United States Navy.
Congratulations.
What a good deal, you know, that paid for me. And after I finished my 4 years in Albuquerque, New Mexico, I got to go to Officers Canada School as a boat ensign. So I got to go to my second nuclear submarine, which was James Monroe,
Right.
which was a new construction in Charleston, South Carolina. So I got aboard her, spent 5 years on James Monroe. Wound up operating out of Guam. So I got to ride the submarine from Charleston, South Carolina, through the canal, and got into Guam. And I wound up making 5 patrols out of Guam as a weapons officer. So I got to be a weapons officer in charge of the strategic missiles and also the torpedoes that the submarines also carried. So that was great. And I made my 5 patrols. Then I also got promoted to lieutenant.
What year was that?
That was in 1973.
Okay.
1973.
Right.
So I wound up after 5 patrols, I got to go to shore duty. So I got to go to shore duty in Pearl Harbor. It was a nasty break. But I got to spend another 2 years in Pearl Harbor.
Wow.
My wife loved it. I loved it. I said, man, what can you ask for? So then after my 2 years on shore duty, I was out to the Naval Training Center there in Pearl Harbor, training officers in nuclear weapons. And after I did my 2 years there, I was due to rotate to another submarine on the East Coast. But the detailer said, can't tell you this, Rios, but we don't have any PCS money, so you have to stay out in Pearl Harbor for another 2 years.
Oh.
Darn. So I went to Ethan Allen, which is another FBM submarine operating out of Pearl Harbor. So I wound up doing 3 patrols as a weapons officer on the Ethan Allen. The good thing about Ethan Allen, a little history about Ethan Allen. Ethan Allen in the early 60s, about 1962, she was the first and only submarine that fired a tactical missile.
Okay.
Fired a Polaris missile. It was a real nuclear warhead during Operation Dominic, which was during the Pacific. They were testing. The United States was testing nuclear weapons.
And what year was this?
1962.
Okay. Wow.
They were testing nuclear weapons, and so the Ethan Allen was the only submarine that actually launched a tactical strategic missile. So she put it in the refit. They took one of the missiles, took off the real warheads, put these exercise warheads on.
Right.
Then they put one nuclear warhead on there. Then they went out and down to the Pacific Test Range and actually fired the missile. Went 1,250 miles downrange. Actually, it was an airburst detonation, which is really.
It was
cool.
where?
Down the Pacific Range, down to about Christmas Island.
Okay.
She did that, and so Ethan Allen did that. And Carbonero was downrange at the target area at periscope depth and had this big camera to watch the detonation.
Okay.
Got the detonation, which was really cool. I got to see the film. So, one thing I forgot to do.
Were there?
When I was in Carbonero, my last duty on Carbonero, since I've been an electronics technician, Carbonero used to be a Regulus guidance boat back in the early 50s, late 50s. The Navy had this program called the Regulus missile, which is a copy of a German V-2 missile. It looked like a big drone that they would fire. But the submarine had to be on the surface, and it took about an hour to get the missile ready. Then they'd launch it.
Right.
Then the submarine would launch the Regulus missile. Then between the launch site and the target was a submarine called a guidance submarine, which Carbonero was. It had this big, huge radar, and it would get the missile in flight, take it over to the target, and they had a real elaborate system on there. When the missile got over the target, you would arm the missile, arm the warhead, turn off the engine, and the drone would fall. That was it.
Okay.
Then it would airburst and it would explode. So the Carbonero, my last duty on the Carbonero was to take that huge antenna off.
Okay.
And we mounted this big camera on the mast. So the submarine would be a periscope that raised the mast with this big camera on it. And I was talking to the photographer that did the installation. I said, "How fast is this camera?" He says, "This camera can take a picture of a bullet in flight, and you can see the lands on the bullet. I said, man, that's fast. That is fast. So the Carbonell was the submarine that got to take pictures of the airburst that the Ethan Allen launched. And I said, wow, what a coincidence. I got to serve on both submarines. One submarine that launched the missile as a weapons officer.
Right.
And then on Carbonell, that installed the camera that took the pictures of the blast, that nuclear blast that the Ethan Allen had launched.
Okay.
I thought that was pretty cool. I got pictures of all those things, so really neat pictures. They're classified now. Before they were classified, they're classified now.
Oh, okay. It's past the
Yeah.
the date. Yeah. Okay. Throughout throughout your service, from basic training, all your duty stations, any casualties, and also you know, the launch from the nuclear detonation. Any casualties that you know of throughout your career?
Well, unfortunately, you know, submarining is just like aviation. Hours and hours of boredom or a few seconds of mere panic. And on submarines, it's a very hazardous environment. One thing that we can't have on submarines, of course, is fire. And the worst thing is flooding.
Is what?
Big tube.
The worst thing is what?
Flooding. And
Oh,
fires.
flood. Okay.
And unfortunately, on two occasions, on two different submarines, we had the worst case scenario where you have flooding into the submarine. When I was in Carbonero as a young lad, I was in the forward torpedo room qualifying, so I was up in the forward torpedo room, going through some systems, and they have a depth gauge up there. And so they have a system called a 7MC system where it announces throughout the ship. Well, I heard on the announcer system it said flooding in the motor room, flooding in the motor room. All of a sudden the boat takes a big up angle. I said, well, we're either coming up or we're sliding down. I went up to the location, looked at the depth gauge, and I said, oh Christ, we're at 200 feet. And then it started going down. It's, oh. And then you can hear them below the ballast tanks. The boat shudders a little bit. And I'm watching that big depth gauge, and all of a sudden it goes. And we start coming up. I said, oh, thank God. And we got to the surface.
Right.
And then they controlled the flooding. There's one of the main seawater systems was a 8-inch pipe. It had a fitting that gave away.
Right.
And allowed the seawater to come pop into the motor room, which is the motors that drive the shafts. But we were lucky that they controlled the flooding real quickly, so we didn't take in too much water to lose that submarine.
And casualties?
Then when I was on James Monroe.
Were there any casualties?
No.
No.
Thank God.
Right. Okay.
There's no casualties. We just, well, the only thing I had to do, we had to go up and I had to go change my pants.
Okay. Okay.
And when I was on James Monroe, we had on patrol, we had a problem with getting from flooding into the submarine. But she was, we were in the during the refit. They did some work on the ventilation mast. We have this big mast goes up, and they have the head valves doing the snorkel, so you can run the engine when the submarine is submerged.
Right.
We got a mast, got this big snorkel, big head valve. And on this head valve, we got two electrodes. So when water hits the electrodes, the valve shuts.
Okay.
You get water in the submarine, which is a good idea.
Right.
Well, what happened during the shipyard period, they were working on the mast, and they didn't put all the screws in for this shroud that protects it. So what happens, we were snorkeling, the head valve was open, the seas shoved the shrouds that came over and blocked the head valve. So when the head valve tried to shut, it couldn't shut. So all the seawater was coming into the submarine. We took in many thousands of gallons of water into the submarine.
Wow.
It flooded it. Fortunately, we were able to get up to the surface. We have these drain pumps, and we were able to pump the water out. But again, it was a very scary moment. We could have lost the submarine if we hadn't controlled that flooding real quickly.
Right.
So when at sea, so we had to surface the submarine. We had to send some guys up there to fix that shroud, put the right screws in so the thing operated normally and got back. But it was good. So I wound up doing 12 patrols on 5 different submarines,
Right.
and I love the Navy. I mean, I really enjoyed it. My last tour was on Stimson, operating out of Charleston and out of Rota, Spain.
What year was that?
That was 1976.
And what rank are you by now?
I made lieutenant commander. I was lieutenant commander, and I was navigator on the Stimson.
Okay.
So I made 3 patrols out of Rota, Spain. Then after I retired, after I left Stimson, I left there in '78. Then I went to Norfolk, Virginia, to be on the staff of the Concept Lab, the commander of the Submarines Atlantic Fleet, where we were in charge of all the submarines in the Atlantic Fleet. And I was on the weapons, in the weapons department, so I was in charge of all the weapons officers on all the submarines operating out of the East Coast.
Okay. How many years did you do total?
I did 23 years total.
Okay. So, and you said your last duty station was where?
Norfolk, Virginia, on the staff at the Concept Land.
And your job there was the weapons commander, I believe?
Yeah, the senior weapons officer was a captain, and I was on the staff. I was in charge of all the SSBA weapons officers.
Okay. All right. And so tell us about that last tour. Where were you, where did you go? Or were you stationary now?
Well, one of the things I got to do being on the staff there, we had to go out and check on the boys all the time. Mm-hmm. So from the subland, from Norfolk, Virginia, I got to go to see the submarines operating out of Holylock, Scotland. We had a squadron of submarines operating in Holylock, Scotland. So I got to go to Holylock, Scotland. I got to go to Rota, Spain, to check on the weapons officers operating out of Rota.
Right.
Down to Charleston, where we had squadron submarines out of Charleston, plus down to Kings Bay, Georgia. At that time, we operated the new submarine base down in Kings Bay, Georgia, where we had SSB submarines operating out of there. So I got to travel a lot. Then I got to also go back to Hawaii to check out my weapons officers out there on tap. So I'm joining the Navy, want to see the world, and by golly, I got all over. I went from.
Were there any places that you didn't mention that you got to go on R&R?
Well, yeah, there's some places that we don't want to talk about.
Okay.
But I got to go to Hong Kong. I told you we spent the week in Hong Kong for Thanksgiving.
Right.
So 3 weeks out of 3 months out of the Philippines.
But you didn't make it to Australia. Sorry about that.
Ah, man, yeah, we were all ready to go to Australia. In fact, I got me a big hat with a big, but I didn't get to go. Because don't never fall.
So you went into service in '59?
I went in. I joined the reserves in '57.
Okay.
But I went on active duty in '58, right out of high school.
Okay.
I graduated in high school in May. In June, I went to Treasure Island for electronics school.
And the year you separated?
I got out in 1980.
1980. Where were you at the time? Where'd you separate?
Well, I was in Norfolk, Virginia.
And how old were you?
Golly, I was 39.
Okay.
I just turned 39.
So what I'm curious about is what did you do after the service? But before we go there, just want to make sure. So I guess we covered every place that you got to visit, right? While you were in the military,
Yeah.
including R&R, which is top secret. So at any rate, what did you do after the military?
Well.
And I'm sorry, where did you said you separated in Virginia?
Yeah, I was in Norfolk, Virginia.
Okay, so where did you go immediately after? Where was home, or did you stay in Virginia, or what?
Well, being on the staff of Subland staff, I got to meet a lot of the contractors.
Okay.
So I got to go to a lot of meetings, and we had a lot of contractors working for us that we had to get them in line. And so when I got out of the Navy, I had to talk about this military contractor come. But anyways, one of the contractors said, "Hey, you ought to come work for us." So I did. I went to work for a international defense contractor out of Washington, D.C.
Right.
But the main office was in Washington, D.C., but I worked in the branch office up in Maryland, in Rockville, Maryland. Went to work with the company's called BAE Systems, which is a big international defense contractor.
Okay.
So I worked for them wound up doing 25 years.
Wow.
And again, working with submarines again was my main job was working with submarines. So I got to go all the submarine bases in the UK, and since the UK has a big submarine program too, we worked with them to make sure they were following the right guidelines.
Okay.
For working, because we gave the UK the Polaris and then the Trident missile system. They had the submarine. They built the submarine, but we gave them the weapon system. And so
Okay.
we had to make sure that they were following our rules.
And just to go back for a minute, what rank were you when you separated?
Lieutenant Commander.
Okay, okay, all right.
05, 04.
04, that's what I was wondering. Okay, so you said 25 years with this company, right?
Yeah.
Wow.
Just like that, I couldn't believe it.
Where did you get to travel on business?
Oh,
for the
yeah,
company? Where'd you go?
Fortunately, or unfortunately, depending on who you talk to. My wife didn't like the idea too much, but she finally got into it because I should take her on some of our trips. I got to go. We had to go twice a year to the UK. We flew into London, and then we'd spend a week or 2 weeks in the UK. Their main submarine base was up in Holyloch, Scotland.
Okay.
So we'd go up to Holyloch, Scotland, and then their headquarters was really out of Bath in the UK, which is just outside, about 90 miles outside London. So my main contact I worked for was in Washington D.C. was the civilian was director of strategic systems, weapons branch, and so I worked for him. He was the main guy, and we would go to the UK, and he was scheduled. He was a very clever guy. He would schedule meetings for a Friday morning in London. So the system was if we had a meeting on Friday, we flew out on Wednesday because they allow us a day to get a captain related to the system. So we'd fly out on Wednesday, spend time on Friday, go to a meeting on Friday, then we'd have another meeting in Bath on Monday, so we got to spend a weekend in London, which was terrible. And then also we got to go to Spain, and also since we had submarines out of Pearl Harbor, so I got to go to Pearl Harbor again, and then also check out the submarines out of Guam, so I got to fly out to Guam.
So you didn't get to travel much at all.
And then since we opened a submarine base down in Kings Bay, Georgia, we go down to Kings Bay, Georgia, and spend some time, or they operated a new submarine base they started up in Bangor, Maine. So I go to Bangor, Maine, which is just outside Seattle. So we'd fly to Seattle, spend some time in Seattle, and then go to the base up there.
How far did the GI Bill take you educationally? How bachelor's, of course.
Well, one of the good deals, I could not believe they did this to me, the Navy. What a good deal. When I was on shore duty, my shore duty tour, I was in Hawaii, they had a program where I could go to get a master's degree from the University of Southern California.
Wow.
That's it.
And, and what?
So I got a master's degree in systems management,
What was your bachelor's in?
electrical engineering.
Oh, wow. Electrical engineering?
Yes.
Nice.
So I got a degree in electrical engineering, and I got my master's degree in systems management from the University of Southern California.
And were you too tired to get your PhD or what?
Yeah, I got tired. Yeah. But the good thing of when I got to travel, I should take my wife with me.
Right. Excellent.
So we would fly we'd fly to London, and we'd spend a weekend in London. And then as well, everybody's going back as well. I take a week's leave and could rent a car, and we'd drive all over the UK, all over England.
Right.
And we did that. And we went
So you said you went to England, you got to Spain. What other countries in Europe?
Scotland, Ireland.
Right.
We traveled all over Spain.
No France, no Italy.
Well, when we were in Spain, we went up to France. We spent some time in France.
There you go. Did you get to Paris or?
Yeah.
Oh, all right.
Went to
Okay.
Paris.
But no Italy, huh?
Nah, I got to go to Italy afterwards, but I didn't get to it.
Where'd you? Okay, after what? After what?
After I retired.
Oh, so so you did go to Italy. Where'd you go?
Well, we had a good deal. We had a cruise after I retired. I came down here and lived in Lake Wales, and we always had cruises. We had a real good thing here in Lake Ashton. We had a good community where they'd sign up for cruises, so we'd get 40, 50 people here from Lake Ashton.
Right.
And we'd go on a cruise.
Okay.
Out of either Fort Lauderdale or Cocoa Beach, which is real close by. And they had this great deal on a repositioning cruise, they call it.
Right.
Where the ship goes from, in this particular case, left from Fort Lauderdale and was going to go to Rome.
Oh.
But it took 17 days.
Right.
So we got on the ship down Fort Lauderdale, stopped over up at St. Croix in the Caribbean.
Right.
Then went to Portugal. Took 5 days to get across the Atlantic Ocean.
Right.
Stopped in Portugal. We spent a day in Portugal. Then we stopped at a place in Spain,
Right.
and then we went to Italy. We went to
In the Mediterranean.
Tuscany.
So you got to experience the Mediterranean.
Yeah.
Where in Italy?
Then we went to Tuscany,
Uh-huh.
and then we went to Rome.
Ah,
And we spent 3 days in Rome.
no Florence, huh?
Well, we went down to Florence later. But
See there?
Yeah. On the next, we went on another cruise. We went down to Florence.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Give me two of your most memorable experiences in your military career.
I think the most experienced one was when I got to, well, other than the flooding that we had on Monroe, was I had to be navigator on Henry L. Stimson. My first patrol as a navigator, we got to launch 2 Poseidon missiles as a test range. They
Wow.
had this thing called a fleet operational test.
Uh-huh.
So we got to launch 2 missiles from the test range, which was really something launching those missiles. To see, get in the submarine, as the weapons officer, go back to put my back against the tube,
Uh-huh.
and we'd fire that missile, and the whole boat goes.
Right.
Then
Just
we fire the second one, boat goes.
from the launch.
Yeah, from the launch.
Uh-huh.
The missile swings.
Were those both detonated in the same?
Yeah, they went to
Area?
Yeah, they went to the same area. They had test.
Okay.
But they went simply there.
Okay, so that's flooding, and that's missile launch. Give me one more.
We have some of the tours we got to stop, and I go on the Carbonero, the diesel boat. It's the fact where we got to stop. We stopped and operated out of South Korea,
Uh-huh.
and we went to Taipei. Well, I forgot we got to go to Formosa,
See there?
and so just love the fact that we got the tours. When I went back home to see my buds that I grew up with in high school,
Uh-huh.
2 of them got no more than 50 miles from Cheyenne. That's it. They grew up there. They stayed there. And as far as I know, they probably died there. And that's all. They never knew anything else. And
Right.
I'd go back and tell them some sea stories, and they couldn't believe that I'd been to Hong Kong and the Philippines, and Hawaii, and they just stayed home.
How about just a few more questions for you?
Sure.
You enlisted. You weren't drafted. I know that already.
Yeah.
Okay, so do you feel like you had all the supplies throughout your military career that you needed to do your job?
Oh yeah. I thought.
Okay. How was the food, by the way?
Well, the submarine force has, by tradition, the best food in the whole Navy.
Right.
And they continue to do that. I mean, even on Carbonero, we always had great food. And the thing about the submarine force, even the nuclear submarines, they have what they call family style. You sit at the table and they bring the food to your table. It's not like big mess halls where you get in line and go through the mess line. We sat at the table. They brought the food to the table, and the messengers did, and so we got they call that family style.
This is like fine dining.
Yeah, and it was great. Well, yeah, it was great. I enjoyed the food. Was super on the submarines.
Right. Did you ever have a problem staying in touch with your family throughout your military career, communication-wise?
Well,
And that was early on. That was before cell phones.
Yeah. Well, the thing about submarines, they call it the silent service for a reason.
Okay.
We got no communications at all.
Okay.
Towards the end there, they started having they had family grams where before you left for patrol, a patrol cycle was basically 3 months. You did 3 months on the submarine and 3 months back in port. And so during the 3 months you were on a patrol cycle, the first month was in a refit.
Right.
Then before you left your home port to go, you had these little, like telegrams you'd fill out and give them to your wife or your girlfriend, and they would fill them out, and it was just like a telegram, just a very short note that they would give to the off-crew office, and they would send them. While you're at sea, that's like you get one a week, and so the Navy would transmit that to it, and so the submarine would get these things like telegrams. And so they'd type them out and then give them to each individual and say, here's a family gram from your wife or your girlfriend
Right.
or your mother. And all it says is, hi, I'm doing fine, just something like that. And the captain always screened them to make sure that nobody got any bad news, because the last thing we'd want to do is have some guy at sea get a Dear John letter and get depressed and go crazy because his wife left him or his
Right,
girlfriend
yeah.
left him. So the captain would screen it, and if he had got a message like that, they just wouldn't give it to him. And so
Okay.
we'd find out the bad news after we got back to port.
Uh-huh.
And so, so there was no communications. It was just one way your family. I mean, you could not communicate with your family when you were at sea.
Right. Okay. Did your military experience influence your thinking about war, about the military in general?
Oh yeah.
In what way?
Well, I think that in my early days in the Navy, in fact, the whole time I was in the Navy, I thought that everybody thought the Navy was first, the country was first, God and country. But I'm not so sure that the modern military service is that way, due to the leadership at the top, the way they teach in at boot camp, the military schools. You know, the military is not a social experience. You know, you're here to serve your country, to defend your country, and you got to fight for your country, and not worry about offending anybody by what you tell them or what you think about somebody. So I think, you know, the military service now is you really got to be dedicated to serve your country now. It's really a challenge. I think that the military service now, God bless them for what they have to do to serve their country.
Okay. Have you retained any of your friendships from the military?
Oh yeah.
Okay.
I still got email buddies now that were out in Carbonero, and that was over 50 years ago. That we still communicate on Facebook, on emails, reunions. I used to go to all Carbonero reunions until about 5 years ago, when there was nobody to go to the reunions. We used to have, you know, 50, 60, 70 people, guys would come there with their families and everything.
Right.
And every year the numbers kept getting dwindling down, and so
Right.
about 5, 6 years ago they just says, hey, no use having a reunion with 3 guys.
Right.
So
Wow.
they stopped. We still communicate with these guys with emails and on Facebook, but I still go to some of the reunions, like some of the later boats. We had bigger crews. Like on the Carbonero, we had a crew of 70 guys that I was with, and on Ethan Allen, we had a crew of 150.
Right.
And then on Blue and Gold, we had Blue and Gold crew. So between everybody else, you had 300, 400 guys that were on that same boat at the same time you were.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm still in contact with them. Emails, Facebook. We still get together.
Okay.
Talk about old times.
How did your service and experiences affect your life?
Well, I think it made me appreciate my country more. What the country has done for me. You know, when I was growing up, I wanted to go to college. I couldn't go to college, didn't have the money or the things, you know. But the Navy got me a bachelor's degree, got me a master's degree, got me to travel all over the world, and I saw everything. I've seen poor people that people would not believe. When we come into Hong Kong, this lady on these bumboats would come alongside the submarine and offer us food and, you know, drink and stuff. And this one lady, she had a little baby in her arms, and she said, "Here, $5. I'll send you my baby
Wow.
for $5."
Jesus.
And we had people that come on board the boat to clean the boat for our trash,
Yeah.
our garbage.
Mm-hmm.
That's all they wanted for payment, was our garbage to clean our boat.
Really?
Now, how poor can people be to do that? They work just for garbage.
Wow.
And we give, of course, we gave them the garbage, plus we gave them bread and food and meat and stuff. We gave them a lot of stuff. You know, we would just give them our garbage.
Right.
We gave a lot of food.
Nice.
There are people who was just unbelievable.
You made a comment before, so here's a final question. Well, there's 2 more. Okay. What do you have to say to future leaders, your family, your children, your grandchildren, etc., as far as going into the future is concerned?
Well, I think the military service, I think, is a great way to grow up, and the country and the service has so much to offer if you want to take advantage of it. But you got to realize, you know, you're in the service to serve your country, and you got to do that and understand there's leadership, and you're to define and defend your country. You know, God gave us a great country, and it's our job to defend it and make sure that we have it for our generation to do that. You know, and not worry about offending anybody, having be careful what you say because you don't want to offend somebody's feelings. You know, you don't want to hurt somebody's feelings. When I was growing up, when I was in the military, I tell you, the chief petty officer, he wasn't worried about my feelings. When he kicked my butt, he says, you know, Rios, get down there and do that. He said, and I didn't. I knew better than trying to disrespect him.
Right.
So you know, you got to have respect for your leaders, and the leaders got to have respect for the troopers underneath it. I mean, it's as simple as that. It's a two-way street. But now, I would love to go back in the military, but I don't think. I think I would last about 5 minutes in today's military.
Okay.
Because it's just unbelievable.
Is there anything you'd like to add that we have not covered in this interview?
No, I think that hey, I enjoyed my time in the service. Unfortunately, I have one son. One of my sons joined the Army. He joined the Army. I couldn't believe he joined the Army. He did. I couldn't. I said, God, Michael, what are you doing? He wanted to be in the Army. Well, the good thing is I got to enlist him in the Army. I could, being an officer, I got to enlist him. So he went in and did his tours, did his 2 years, went to see sunny Southeast Asia, and he did his tour and got out. And so God bless him. But you know, the high school kids today, you know, have so much to look forward to, and the military is a great place. But you know, it is a sacrifice. I mean, you're not going to get rich in the military, but you do get great satisfaction of serving your country.
Well, I'm just going to add, you're not going to get rich, but you can acquire a lot of great experience traveling. It's not free anymore, but school, education, and the discipline always does everybody good, basically,
Oh, yeah,
usually.
I mean,
So
I never could have, you know, like I said, my kids that I graduated from high school with, you know, they had nowhere near the experience that I had, you know. Some got the education, got to college, but nobody got to travel the world as I had seen it, you know, the people, to work with such great people. But I enjoyed my tour. I invite anybody, hey, go in the military.
Gotcha.
It's the experience you can never forget, ever.
I want to thank you for a great interview, and I also want to thank you for your service.
Oh, my pleasure, my pleasure.
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
You're welcome.